we'll go to clip 5. So here he's going to be talking about his arrival in 1944 and kind of a little bit of a recollection of some of his early missions.
Cool.
So you got over there roughly what month?
October 44.
October 44. Okay.
Maybe September, I guess. But we stood down for nearly a month to switch from P-47 to P-51. So it was almost Christmas before I got any good hunting in.
Okay, yeah. So I was going to. My next question was going to be, did you fly in support of Operation Market Garden, which was in Holland in September? But
Got one mission in on that, I think.
Really?
I think.
Did you fly over Bastogne?
Probably.
Yeah.
But I don't remember.
Yeah.
That's
Pretty foggy.
Yeah.
the forest, right?
That's right. Battle of the Bulge. Right around
Bad weather
Christmas.
there again.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, we'll keep moving here.
Were you billeted with a local family, or were you actually on the base?
No. Us English guys had it made. We took over an old country courthouse with room after room after room in it. Our squadron was in it. One of the sister squadron took over a little castle, had a moat around it. You'd never believe on party nights there were some people swimming around that moat, whether they wanted to or not. And the third squadron had quarters on the base. But they weren't all that lucky. We even had a concrete runway at Martlesham Heath. Some of them had pure steel planking or mud.
So one of the things I just want to point out, what are you going to say, Tony, before I jump?
No, it's just interesting. There's such a wide range of experiences from the people we've interviewed in terms of what the home base was like, in terms of the quality of the accommodations, whatever, the bunks, the barracks, the Quonset huts. And I thought it was just interesting that one of the things he thought was a perk was you actually had a cement runway. So
yeah. No kidding.
Right.
Okay. So Martlesham Heath, I've got another great book called Airfields of the 8th, Then and Now.
You are such a geek. That is awesome.
I love this stuff. But what's really cool that I've been able to do with this book over the years, as I've interviewed pilots that were part of the 8th Air Force, I can find their airstrip and then they autograph the page for me.
Oh, that's cool.
So I don't have as many as I wish I did, but I've got several autographs and it's something I'll always keep. But Martlesham Heath, it was actually near Ipswich, England, which he talked about. Okay. It's not far from the cliffs of Dover, as he mentioned also, but this was actually a World War I air base. Okay. So in 1917, it became associated with experimental aircraft. And then later, the home of the Aircraft of Armament Experimental Establishment. In 1943, the station became one of a group of grass-surfaced airfields earmarked for the fighters of the 8th Air Force. That's his unit. And the 1,600-yard runways were laid down using experimental process of soil stabilization with oil and tar products. Okay. So they put oil and tar on the soil and call it good, I guess. I don't know. Yeah. So nearby housing estates and major roads presented difficulties in sighting the runways, and it was necessary to take the southern end of the northwest southeast one through the middle of the camp. So what's interesting about this really is, and this is something we'll put on our website when we make the Glenn Crum page, I've got a German aerial photo of his base right here. We'll have that on the website. I've also got in this other book, aerial photos of where his unit was billeted, that courthouse that he was talking about, and one of the other places which had the moat around it.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. He said people were swimming in it. I'm wondering what kind of frivolity allowed them to swim in it.
He said you swam in it whether you wanted to or not. So
exactly.
So anyway,
there was a story there.
Yeah. So Martlesham Heath, just an interesting. It's I love these old air bases. There were so many air bases in England. I mean, they just peppered the landscape over there, and so. Anyway, it's a fascinating subject and everything nonetheless. But now let's move on to, we're going to move on to this one here. This is him talking about his love for strafing targets.
I got in some strafing on locomotives one time and on a truck one time. I was a crack shot with strafing. because I'd instructed in that back at Seymour Johnson. Clobbered a staff car one time, and probably full of bigwigs because nobody else had a staff car. Clobbered a flak tower one time.
Yeah.
Clobbered a railroad switching station. That's another reason the Germans couldn't do well towards the end of the war. The railroads and main roads and bridges were all interdicted. They couldn't get through to bring their ammo. Remember on D-Day, we weren't harassed at all by enemy fighters.
So, it's interesting he mentioned about later in the war, the interdiction missions that they had on the transportation and whatnot. We've mentioned not last year, the year before, when we were featuring a lot of, not episodes, but content associated with Masters of the Air, that the bomber mafia, the Ira Akers, the people that were in charge of the 8th Air Force took a really long time to figure that out. They were focused more on, like ball bearing plants and things like that. By the time that he was in there, they're like, no, we're going to blow up railroads. It was a transportation network because of the dispersed nature of the manufacturing that Albert Speer put in place to allow them to continue to build armaments because everything wasn't under one roof. The weak spot when you have dispersed manufacturing is you got to transport stuff back to these dispersed places to get them to be able to manufacture something. And so he was right. By the time he was right, of course he's right. He was there. Well, I guess what I should put that with a little more humility is what his firsthand personal account shared with us is really aligned really well with some of the things we've learned as citizen historians about what was happening this time of the year war. So yeah, it was petroleum plants, railways, staff cars. We've heard of other people that we spoke to who shot up staff cars. So yeah, pretty interesting.
And I regret that we weren't able to give close air support to the people climbing up Omaha Beach cliffs and so forth. I do not know to this day why we didn't. It may be because we didn't understand the concept of close air support. I think that's part of it. We never trained in it. We didn't know how. Today we work within 100 yards of ground troops with our supersonic jet. In those days, I don't think we understood that we could do that with the P-51 and P-47 and get away with it. Later on, as the ground forces progressed, I have heard that Patton wouldn't move without a flight of P-47s over his head, because he learned how to use them.
Sure. Yeah, I think a lot of the landing forces at D-Day, from what I read, got most of their support from battleships.
They got lots of battleships. There was one B-24, I think, dropped on radar, but I'm not sure whether he hit Germany or England. The fighters primarily flew patrols east of the cliffs, 25 miles back and forth and 24. And there's one to the north flying back and forth, and one to the west, I think, flying back and forth. Horseshoe shape, 25 miles from the cliffs. It makes me sick to think we didn't clobber those guys up there. We could have. The weather was rotten, for one thing.
That's what I read, yeah.
Weather was rotten. I wasn't there yet. I wish I had been.
He raises an excellent point. We hear a lot about the Navy supporting landing on D-Day and that some bombing efforts, behind the lines to disrupt, places like we've been to in Valognes, France, which, was kind of a logistics base. And I know the weather wasn't ideal, but I think he's right in that sense because, think about the damage, 500 fighter aircraft, P-51s, P-47s could have done ranging up and down that beach. And maybe they were more worried. I read somewhere that one of the reasons they kept low-flying aircraft out of the area is they were afraid that we'd shoot down our own planes thinking they were German, that they wanted to know that anything was in the sky was German and they could shoot it down. But that's a really excellent point. I don't think I've heard or have read a lot about why that didn't happen.
A lot of the with the bombers, coming in trying to, essentially soften up the defenses, they were concerned, of course, because they couldn't see through the cloud cover about hitting their own guys, because they were bombing all the way up to the point that our guys are coming in to land. Yeah. And so that's why there was so much smoke on the beaches whenever the guys came in to land, and some of the landing craft got off course. you know, that was really a big blunder.
Yeah.
When you look back on it, because it scattered our guys all over the place along Omaha Beach, and didn't do anything good at all. I think, as one general said, you know, the Air Force would have done just as well if they had stayed home in bed that day.
Totally.
You know?
Totally. Yeah.
So
interesting.
Yeah. So I can't seem to find it right now, but there's an entry here in the book where it has Glenn's mission, and they talk about all the strafing that was involved with this one mission. And they even have a score of like damaged versus destroyed for stuff that's on the ground. And it's pretty impressive. These guys, I bet that would have been so much fun.
Could you imagine coming in at 400 miles an hour
Oh.
with a squadron of P-51s, and they're flying in, you know, side by side, back to back, and you're just freaking just letting it go, man. Oh my gosh, especially the Thunderbolts with 8 50 caliber machine guns. I mean, that would have left a mark.
I mean, those were tank busters too. Those PP-47s were just monsters when it comes to being able to take out armor.
Yeah.
So yeah, crazy stuff. I mean,
I wish we had Crum's gun camera footage. It would have been awesome.
Oh, that would have been great.
With them. Yeah.
All right.
The first encounter, most people won't believe this. I'm driving along over Brame Island about 35,000 feet with a guy on each wing, minding my own business, looking around. I look to my right, and there's a 262 sitting there, flying perfect formation with me, 3 feet away. I could see his goggles. The first thing you do when you see something like that is have a cardiac. And then when you recover from your cardiac, you punch off your drop tank so you be more maneuverable. Of course, the engine quits because you're burning on the drop tanks. As soon as you switch back to internal fuel, the engine will regain its health, and maybe you will too. By then, the 262 is going down at a rapid rate. I went after him, and he kept fading away in the distance. I hosed off a few rounds, but no use.
Wow.
He was long gone. Smart aleck.
Wow. Yeah, no kidding.
Now, he could go about 9.6 Mach going down, and I can only go about 0.8. As a matter of fact, I got into what's called compressibility, when the airflow over your wings reaches the speed of sound, but you don't. And the controls act differently. In my case, the controls got very, very sloppy. They would hardly work. Didn't have much effect. P-47, I understand the stick would get real tight. I never hit compressibility on a P-47. Our first truly supersonic airplane was the F-86.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so, you know, compressibility is something that can affect any airplane as it approaches Mach 1. In Mach 1 at sea level, you know, I think it's around 700 and something miles an hour, right? So that was something, it's called the sound barrier. When you break Mach 1, you're going faster than the speed of sound. So right now, as our audience is listening to us talking, they're hearing our voice coming through their speaker at the speed of sound. Not speed of sound, but yeah, at the speed of sound, the speed that sound travels through the air. Once you're flying faster than that, the air will bunch up on top of the wings and create shock waves along the wing surfaces. And there's 3 primary effects. They're literally called the big 3 effects on your aircraft when this happens. One's called drag divergence, and that's when the drag increases exponentially as you get closer to basically Mach 1, your Mach number, and it requires a lot more power to overcome that. It literally, the air is acting like a fluid, and it's slowing you down. It's getting thicker as you're jamming up those air molecules. And then the other one is called the Mach buffet. That's when your aircraft will start to shake and vibrate significantly because you no longer have nice free-flowing laminar flow over your wings. It's turbulent. And then the scary one, and this is the one that the ME-262 was most prone to, it was called the Mach tuck. And the Mach tuck is when there's a rearward shift in lift. Instead of it being on the forward edge of the wings and having nice laminar flow, creating lift, that air moves back onto the wing, and the lift will cause the aircraft to nose down, and it's difficult to pull out of that. And if you're already in a dive, which means you're gaining airspeed, which means you're going to get close to that Mach number where compressibility occurs, A lot of ME-262 pilots died from crashing because their jets were so fast that they could get to that Mach number more quickly, that compressibility number, and suffered the effects of that. And he's right. The P-51s and P-47s, they would start to suffer from compressibility around Mach 0.7, 0.8. So, 80% of Mach 1. The 18.5 degree sweep of the ME-109's wing and the additional power it had with the engines could allow it to get up to about 0.86 Mach, 0.84 Mach before it started suffering from that. So one of the things I had a question about when I was doing research on this is if this happens to every airplane, what do we do to overcome it? We routinely have fighter jet that can break the speed of sound, that can go past Mach 1, past Mach 2. This SR-71 Blackbird can go past Mach 3 and 4. And here are the things that we've learned to overcome that. And what happens is when you get up to that close to that Mach 1 and the plane suffers compressibility, is you can break through that and you'll break through the sound barrier and it creates a sonic boom. And then your airplane will have that laminar flow and it's fine again until it starts to bunch up to Mach 2 and Mach 3 and Mach 4.
Crazy physics going on there.
It is.
It's crazy.
And here's something else a lot of people don't know. There is no single boom. When a plane is flying overhead, if it's flying above Mach 1, and you hear the boom, that's not just the boom. It is constantly booming, and you're just hearing the boom of it going by you. It is booming the whole time. It's a series of pops. It's pop, 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 and you're just hearing one of those pops, which is a boom as it goes by.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So here are some of the things that we do now to overcome compressibility and fly above Mach 1. One is swept and thin wings. By sweeping the wings backwards, you're forcing the airflow, the air velocity to slow down because it has to go over a longer area before it makes it over the wing. So all of these sort of solutions are about trying to slow the air going either into an engine or over a wing so that you can manage that Mach more easily. So swept wings. Thin wings are often called supercritical airfoils, where these airfoils have a flatter top and a curved bottom. It's designed to create basically weaker, further aft shock waves. It reduces drag. Remember I said that the ME-262 would have that Mach dive that it would happen. It was called the
Mach tuck.
The Mach tuck. That's it. Well, that's because the lift was being pushed further back in the wing. Well, having this special airfoil that has a flatter top and a curved bottom helps keep the lift more in the center of the wing. There's also something called the area rule. It's the Coke bottle design, it's called. And that's when you narrow the fuselage where the wings are attached. And that allows you to have a smoother total cross-sectional area that minimizes the drag-producing shock waves. So that helps you take care of drag divergence, that sluggishness that it feels as that air bunches up around the airplane. A few more. Powered flight controls, right? Just power through it. Use hydraulics and electronics to continue to have those control surfaces work when everything gets sluggish. And then here's something that I had not thought of. I've seen them on these supersonic airplanes all the time. You've probably seen these jets that have this cone in the front, and the air goes into the cone, and as the engine accelerates or increases thrust, you'll see that cone move in and out.
Okay,
and
yeah.
That's called a variable geometry / high thrust. Supersonic jets use specialized inlets to slow the air to subsonic speeds before entering the engine. Combined with high thrust engines, they overthrust the dramatic spike in wave drag. So literally what you're trying to do with all of these solutions is slow the relative speed of the air as it goes over a wing, around the fuselage, or through the engine.
That is amazing. I had no idea that a lot of those I guess advancements are made really just to control the speed of the air.
Yeah, and one of them, the swept wing, the first one, the swept wing that we use now, 30, 40 degrees. A lot of people think that the Germans were way ahead aeronautically by having an 18.5 degree swept wing. My research shows it's not true. The primary reason why the Germans swept the wing they may have understood that.
Was this on the 262 or the 109 you're talking about?
The 262.
The 262, okay.
So if you look at the 262, it has a swept wing. 18.5
Yep.
degrees. And they did it more for structural reasons to be able to hold those big UMO jet engines. They couldn't fit it on a straight wing and have it structurally supported. So they swept it. But what they inadvertently did is help increase or push out that compressibility to a place much faster with that airframe than the conventional ones that we were using with the P-57.
So it makes you wonder.
P-41s.
It makes you wonder if the Germans actually did break the sound barrier a few times.
So
and
there's
it was just never documented. You know.
So there people are very polarized by this. There's accounts by German pilots that said in a dive that they went faster than the speed of sound. And then there's a lot of pilots and engineers that are like, bull crap, and you can't prove it to us. It is something that is very hotly contested and debated to this day.
Wow. So I know that the first Allied jet fighter aircraft during World War II was the British Gloucester Meteor, I believe. I don't think it had swept wings. I think it was a fixed wing type aircraft, straight out with the jet engines on it, if I remember correctly.
You do. And in fact, a lot of the American jets after World War II were straight wing designs, like the US Navy Panthers that flew off aircraft carriers. Those were jet planes. They had straight wings, but none of those were Mach capable. But you gotta remember, if Mach 1 is around at sea levels around 700 miles per hour, our fast planes were flying 440. So at that time, where we were right after World War II, was making jet planes that could allow us to fly 500 and 600 miles per hour. So it didn't we couldn't fly past Mach 1, but we could get a lot closer to it with those jet engines and the controls. Then when we started developing like the Sabres and whatnot, we started understanding the swept wing and the floating tails and all those things that allowed us to punch through the sound barrier.
I'm going to thank you for all that. That's fantastic stuff. I found the entry in the book for this event that Glenn just talked about. So this on March the 19th, Lieutenant Colonel Backus led a penetration target withdrawal support from around 11 in the morning till about 1650 hours in the afternoon, about 4:50. The bombers were met by the 359th and the 360th at about 1:15 p.m. north of Wiesbaden, and were taken to Bolden. Was it Bolden? Bolin. They were brought back out and later left at 1525 near Koblenz. Lieutenant Crum of the 359th bounced ME-252, but failed to score any hits on the plane.
Was it 262 or 252?
The 262.
Got it. Okay.
If I misspoke, sorry.
Yep, gotcha. Yep.
And the 361st swept ahead to Chemnitz and Leipzig, but saw nothing else after that. So that's it right there in black and white. Glenn didn't see it.
Independent verification.
That's right. Yeah. All right. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the fact that Glenn felt like, really for a lot of the air superiority we had, it wasn't only that we were taking out so many planes, but it's also due to this next thing.
There are probably bigger problems than that. Probably the one big problem was fuel. I want you to make a point of this. The Air Force was hammering German factories and runways and airfields and bridges 2 years before D-Day. Let me repeat that. The Air Force was attacking Germany 2 years before D-Day.
Yep.
Not in massive raids, but they were doing it. They hit Berlin early.
Yep.
For morale purposes. Like the B-25 raid we pulled on Japan didn't do much damage, but it did a lot of morale good for us.
Yeah.
We shot down several, not me. Several were shot down by catching them in a traffic pattern with their wheels down.
What about the 262?
I don't know that they were on the Autobahn, but they could have been. I helped open up Ramstein Air Base, which is still active in when did we open up Ramstein? About 1961, I would think. And we used the Autobahn because the runways weren't quite ready yet.
What was your impression of the German pilots?
Great.
Their skills and everything?
Great.
Yeah.
You got to remember, the German pilots started flying in Spain about 1935, 36.
Before Franco, wasn't it? in the
Yeah.
Civil War there?
They're on the wrong side, whatever it was. So by the time what was the big British Battle of Britain came along, those guys had a lot of flying hours under their belt. The time we got over there, they had more and more and more flying time. But a lot of them were shot down by then too.
So real quick, he's talking about the Autobahns. For anybody out there that doesn't know, the Autobahn in Germany is famous today because it's, parts of it, I'm not sure if all of it is or parts of it at least have no speed limit.
Yeah.
And you can go on YouTube and type in, Autobahn, and you'll find some exotic sports car, doing 200 miles an hour on the Autobahn. To me, that's a freaking death wish. I mean, because how fast are you going to come up on some guy in that left lane that's not going to get out of the way? Okay. But anyway, little do we know, a lot of people don't realize this, but that's an idea that Dwight Eisenhower brought back to the US and put into place when he became president, which was the Autobahn system, which is, Tony, the interstate system, right?
Absolutely.
So during the war, I mean, one of the very forward-looking things that Adolf Hitler did do for building the infrastructure of Germany and everything was to lay out this great interstate highway system. And it also doubled as runways as their air bases were taken out. And I've got some guys that I interviewed that were actually on the Autobahn and taking pictures of German Me-262s parked off the side of the Autobahn in brush.
Yeah.
After the war, just still sitting there. Some of them have been scavenged for parts and everything. And it was amazing, the lengths that they were going to carry on the fight whenever their air bases were, basically big craters in the ground and everything. But anyway, one of the things he also mentioned was the way that they take down the 262s. And a lot of times we couldn't catch them. They were just far too fast for us. And, but whenever one of the things that they would do is run out of fuel rather quickly. And so whenever they come back down to land to fuel back up again, a lot of our guys would just follow them down and they'd pick them off as they're coming in with their wheels down to land and everything. And it worked. And that's how a lot of people got them,
Yeah. And the Autobahn's really interesting because I think the general perception of it is it was a project that was started by the Nazi Party to show how advanced the German civilization was, to show the adoption of modern technology, to help provide jobs for still struggling economic Germany. And it turns out that that's not entirely true. It turns out that the Autobahn, as it's currently constituted, if you think of the Autobahn, you think of basically like I-25, I-70, right? 2-lane highways separated that allow you to go safely at higher speeds than you can in the city. And the first roads that were built like that were in Germany were built in 1913.
Wow, really?
1913 was the first ones. And it started, and in fact, those roads that were initially built, those highways, and it was just like 6-7 miles of them, were copied by the Italians, by Piero Pericelli in 1924. So after World War I, obviously, they created the Autostrada between Milan and the northern Italian lakes. That is considered the first true modern roadway in the world.
I always thought that Hitler was the guy who came up with that, but no, not true.
And I thought the same thing, dude. I mean, up until, I saw that he mentioned the Autobahn in here and we were talking about it, it's like, okay, this is going to be about, Germany doing that. And so here in 1924, the Italians are actually taking an early German idea and making an Autobahn. And then in the 1930, basically, there was an organization that was led by Willy Hoff, H-O-F, that really wanted to get an Autobahn built, a proper one, the one that we think of today. And initially, the Nazi Party was completely opposed to it. Legislatures from the Communists and the Nazi Party saw it as bougie, as this pork project for rich people to drive their automobiles.
Bridge to nowhere.
Totally, a bridge to nowhere, a high-speed rail in California, right? These sort of projects that's hard to get like the average person behind. And it wasn't until Germany came to power in 1933, and one of his, actually the person who would precede Albert Speer in terms of being kind of the architect for various things in the Third Reich, Fritz Todt, he was the one that said, "Hey, we can make this ours. We can have Adolf Hitler's face off on it." So what he did is he took the Autobahn and presented it to the German public as Hitler's idea. He was represented as having sketched out the future network of highways while he was in Landsberg prison in 1924 for the failed beer hall putsch. So they completely rewrote history and said, not only do we support it now, but Hitler had plans for this when he was in jail serving time for treason. And so in September of 33, he helped break ground on what would be the first stretch of the highway. And what was interesting is by 1941, they had to stop work on it. So from 33 to 41, they ended up building almost 2,400 miles of highway, which is a pretty significant amount. It produced jobs, but they were very low paying. And according to the sources that I have, you can't make this shit up. This is so Nazi Germany. The pay was horrible. The living conditions were horrible. So when people decided to strike, they had the Gestapo come in and basically put them in concentration camps.
Oh my gosh.
So even their own people who were, I guess, would have been seen as kind of communist rabble rousers because they were quote unquote striking against these horrible working conditions and pay, were put in prison. And worse than that, what they did to get the Autobahn going again during the wars, obviously used slave labor. But if any Germans were involved, they'd have SA troops in there that could narc on them, that could intimidate them into not striking. During the war, the speed limit of the Autobahn was reduced to 62 miles an hour and later 50. And by 1944 or 43, there was so little traffic because of rationing that the only thing that you saw on the Autobahn were people riding bicycles. Talk about going backwards, huh?
And probably some airplanes.
and some airplanes, right? They speak to how it ended up being, secret runways for things like the ME-262. And then after the war, what's interesting is they had problems bringing it back online because, Germany was cut in half.
Yeah.
And a lot of
true,
places, a lot of places where they wanted to build the Autobahn didn't belong to West Germany anymore. So they had to reconfigure the Autobahn. And then finally, after German reunification, they were able to kind of reconfigure and bring the Autobahn into East Germany. And something that's the last few sentences here I thought were interesting. Most of the Autobahn was not destroyed by Allied planes or bombing. They were destroyed by retreating Germans who were told to knock down every bridge, anything that they could do to prevent the Americans from using it. And the debris from those destroyed bridges in many places still lie below the rebuilt series of viaducts at various crossings that they built on top of the ones that were destroyed. And one of those that were left abandoned in 1941 was finally constructed to its original configuration in 1993 under German reunification. It took that long to complete it.
I was just going to say, for some of these interstates, these Autobahns that were basically cut off because of East Germany, West Germany, and the Berlin Wall and everything, those truly are bridges to nowhere now. They were at the time,
Yes.
And the other thing that strikes me is think of all the debris in Germany from that war. And think of the fossil record, a million years from now, if humans are still around and they're going through and they're like, what happened in this period right here?
So this is a thing. So, we determined that there was a large, extinction level event at the end of the Cretaceous that helped destroy the dinosaurs because of an iridium layer. Maybe the layer we're going to leave behind will have a bunch of nitrates and phosphates in it from all the gunpowder and blown up explosives and things like that. That might be our layer, right? Our
lots of rusting iron from shrapnel and bullets and everything like that. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So at any rate, I guess to sum up everything, the Autobahn was not Hitler's idea. It was portrayed as such. It had its origins way before that. And
fantastic
in everything that happened with the Nazi Party, everything they tried to do blew up in their faces. So they tried to make this thing this world-class awesomeness. And by the middle of the war, all you could do is drive your bike on it.
All right, we're going to move on. Here he talks a bit about some of the losses that he experienced in casualties.
Did you have any casualties in your group? You guys
with? Most of them.
Really?
Yeah.
So,
I lost every roommate I had.
Oh my gosh.
to being killed in action, or just or shot down and
One of them had a mid-air collision. That took care of two.
Jeez.
In fact, we had two mid-air collisions. That wiped out 4 airplanes. Another guy spun in the overcast. Another guy just disappeared. I don't know what happened to him. So most of them that I lost were non-combat casualties. They were over Germany, but they were non-combat. We were lousy instrument pilots.
Yeah.
That's bad because the weather was lousy. And the guys who had been there a long time didn't share the wealth very much as to getting to lead the flights. And if you're flying wing all the time, you don't develop your instrument flight techniques. But at least that's the way my group.
Wow.
That's the way his group was, he was saying.
Yeah.
There was a lot of professional jealousy among us so-called experts. But we were buddies. We were all drinking out of the same trough primarily. There were at least 3 episodes where a guy was shot down and a wingman would land in a wheat field and pick him up. Are you aware of that?
Obie O'Brien.
It happened with a P-51 pilot named Deacon Priest from your town, I think.
Yeah, I know
Cool
that
name.
Deacon Priest. Ask him about picking up his squadron commander.
Okay.
I think maybe they threw the canopy off. The squadron commander got in first, and Deacon got in on top of him. They were in a wheat field full of cocks. They went weaving down through there, but got airborne. Got her home. On the Ploesti raid, I believe it was a P-38 second lieutenant who didn't even know how to fly, landed and picked up his boss in a P-38. And there was a P-47 episode where somebody landed and picked up somebody. Now back home, you don't know whether to court-martial a guy for doing that or give him a medal. And I don't know what these guys got. Because the odds are you're not going to make it. Soft field's going to nose over and maybe pin you down. But they all made it.
Wow.
And there were at least 2 episodes where American pilots stole a Focke-Wulf or a Messerschmitt and flew it home. They hadn't been captured yet.
Wow. These guys were shot down, like Allied airmen that were
Yeah,
shot down.
yeah. And they'd evade for 2 or 3 days. And
Fly off in an enemy plane? Cool.
let me give you some horrifying statistics. The bomber pilots had about a 33% chance of making it, of completing their missions. The B-17 boys and the B-24 boys. The fighter boys had about a 66% chance of completing their missions. Number one, we weren't valuable targets in the first place. They wanted to waste their ammo on the bombers. Number two, we flew considerably higher than the bombers. They would be at 5,000 feet because they were heavy and couldn't get much higher. And we were a lot lighter and could get up to 35,000 feet for escort. Plus, we were a lot faster and maybe a little harder to hit. I got hit twice. Once I heard it go kaboom, ping, and once I found a hole when I got home. I didn't even know I'd been hit. And they were non-damaging holes. Didn't hurt anything.
So that was flak that actually hit
Yeah,
you.
flak,
Right?
88 millimeters. You could see those things coming up. They look like a red tennis ball just floating up after you.
Wow.
No kidding. Did you fly mostly night missions? Or?
No. I rarely flew at night. Rarely. We would take off maybe 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, and we'd be home by noon or 1 o'clock. The bomber boys would take off an hour before us, grind around and around and around 300 or 400 feet per minute, trying to get up to 15, 18,000 feet before they headed over the channel. Then they'd cross in maybe 22, 24,000 feet. And their position was always given away by black smoke, puff, 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 puff. Flak. They were there waiting for them.
So you could actually see the flak coming up during the daylight.
Yes!
Well, we've had guys, Alfred Kramer, talk about that, and that's a pretty scary concept to think that you can fly around and see these big, red hot, glowing pieces of exploding bomb coming up to your altitude.
Well, that's the thing that I was confused about. And again, this was early on with the interviewing, and I said, well, were you flying at night? Because I
Yeah.
didn't know how you could see them, He's like, no, 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 you can see them coming up. And I'm amazed at that. I didn't think that the shells would be red hot
Yeah.
enough so that you could see them coming up at you from these planes that are 30,000 feet up.
So that is, you just answered kind of the thing right there. You've got a shell that's 88 millimeters in diameter, and the muzzle velocity is so fast that you can shoot that shell and it will travel 25,000 feet in the air. In order to get a shell to do that, it ends up just being incandescent.
It makes total sense now because
Yep.
of the friction and everything. That's
Yep.
crazy.
Because doing that takes a lot of energy and it creates a lot of heat when it leaves those really long barrels of those 88s. But I've never heard it described that way. I've heard Alfred Kramer describe the little black puffs of how they, when they exploded. I don't remember hearing anyone talk about that. That was really interesting.
Well, one of the things he talked a little bit about the stats, 33%, for the bomber guys, 66 for the fighter pilot guys. But I've always wondered, is that, total losses, shot down, captured, killed, wounded. And do you have any I think you've got some information on maybe more of a breakdown of those stats.
I do. And it was actually difficult to puzzle out. I had to use some more advanced AI algorithms to pull it out. Like, you can't if you just Google it, they'll say it's really hard to parse it out.
Yeah.
You go into, a paid Gemini subscription, and it touches some sources that you can't get. And just a quick reminder for people, if we just look at the Bomber Force, the 8th Air Force and the Bomber Force, they experienced basically around 40,000 casualties. And casualties are defined by deaths and POWs. So that does not include people who were wounded, treated, and came back to action or went home. These are the people who died or were POWs. So the numbers of people actually affected physically by this war was much higher. And he said that 33% attrition rate. The research I have here says that by 1943, 77% of airmen serving before D-Day became casualties. Well, you subtract that from 100, there's your 33%. And he didn't have the AI in front of him. This is from him being a colonel and just knowing stuff like that. So he's exactly correct. But what I had problem puzzling out was what were the fighter pilot losses, because there are a lot of them just lumped in 8th Air Force. And this is the table that came from one of the United States Army statistical or military statistical branches. So if we look at the European theater, if we look at total KIAs and MIAs, so people that never went home, the bomber crews lost about 45,000 men. The pilots around 4,500 to 5,500 men. So about 10% of that. Total POWs in the bomber crews was around 28,000. With the fighter pilots, it was around 3,500 to 4,500. So just a fraction. And in fact, they say that the bomber crews, now we're talking about the bomber crews relative to the fighter crews, accounted for about 75 to 80% of all the United States Army Air Force casualties over Europe. These casualties were so great, just to remind our audience, that the 8th Air Force suffered more casualties than the entire United States Marine Corps during the entire war. So we think about these battles in the Pacific and how horrific they were, and they were.
Yeah.
And more men were dying in the skies over Europe because of how treacherous the fighting was. And lastly, this is the last piece I have on this. He talked about all the reasons why the bombers suffered more. And obviously they had more men, they were slower, they were in the air longer. But a lot of people don't realize it's also a hell of a lot harder to get out of a bomber that's flailing. It's called the tumble. And that's when a heavy bomber is hit. It often went to a violent spin. It broke apart. The centrifugal forces prevented pilots from getting out. Whereas the fighter exit, you simply had to slide the canopy back, roll the plane over, and out you were. So really interesting. I don't think we've ever covered this ground in terms of trying to break apart the fighters from the bombers. But at the end of the day, they both suffered terribly. But you hear, and we heard Obie O'Brien say this, and we've heard other people who flew in pilots say the same thing, fighter pilots, that they thought that the bomber pilots had it worse, The bomber pilots had higher attrition rates, and they were in charge of 9 other men. It wasn't just them in a plane.
That's true. I mean, in the end, you've got a lot more control over your fate in a fighter plane
You do.
than you do on a, yeah.
So at the end of the day, the survival rate, as he described it, for a fighter was twice 66 versus
Yeah.
33 of what a bomber was. But I wouldn't have wanted I mean, who knows what I would have done if I were of draft age in 1941. I would have signed up for the war, I'm sure. And knowing what, I would have known then, the Army Air Corps would have seemed like a really exciting thing to have joined. But it ended up being some of the most frightening combat that any serviceman would face in any of the services by either side.
I heard a quote the other day, which was, you don't want to be in a position where you're up there wishing you were down there.
Yeah.
You want to be down there wishing you were up there.
Yeah.
And when you're in these planes, and like he said, the weather was horrible.
Yeah.
And these guys, there's more than one time in this book where they're flying back to their base after mission and they couldn't make it. They had to land at other bases, spend the night there, and take off from there and go back home the next day.
We talked to Obi about this. John Luckadoo talked about this. He said that their ability to fly by instruments they didn't get enough training in it. Lucky Luckadoo said he finally got training in it after he completed his missions and went back stateside.
Yeah, that's right.
He's like, I sure could have used that over there. And then you just heard, Glenn talk about, did you lose people? Yeah, all of his bunkmates. And he said 2 of them collided. He goes, we lost 2 right there. I hadn't thought about that. You get 2 of them collided. There's 2 of your friends that died in one episode, in one incident.
For
Holy
sure.
shit.
For sure. All right, let's move on. Now he's going to talk about VE Day.
Whenever the war ended, where were you and how did you feel?
I was in London, having a good time.
Were you on leave or?
Yes.
Okay. So I bet it was just jubilation.
There was jubilation. You couldn't move around Piccadilly Circus, as they called it.
Mm-hmm. Was there any talk of your unit going to the Pacific Theater?
I think so, and I think some of our pilots did. Those that hadn't been there very long, didn't have any or many missions. I think they did.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anybody went as a unit, taking their airplanes.
Some of the research I did on that, because I was wondering, okay, I keep hearing about this. When the war ends in Europe, did any of these guys actually go to the Pacific Theater? The research I did said no fighter groups actually went. 0 went to the Pacific Theater. Now, there may have been a few guys here and there that requested transfers or whatever, but you think about it, the war ended in May of 1945. What's going on in the Pacific Theater in May of 1945? Not a lot. Okinawa's wrapping up, but there's really no other big battles for the rest of the war in the Pacific Theater.
Well, the Japanese Air Force by that time was pretty laid low. They were mostly damaging us through kamikaze actions. We could have used the pilots for that.
Right.
But yeah, you're not only that, but at that time, the United States Navy, and there's a Air Force, a U.S. Army Air Force in the Philippines and Central Pacific was huge. From what I remember about reading about that is the pilots in the European theater who wanted to transfer to the Pacific, who wanted to continue to fight, were kind of being reconstituted, brought stateside, being retrained, and the war kind of ended when they were still in that staging phase. Because if Operation, I'm trying to remember the name of the operation, the invasion of Japan. It's a real cool name. If that had happened, the invasion of Japan, you can bet your ass those guys would have been over there, but they didn't need to be.
That's correct, because, and up until about July of 1945, our own government was planning for that invasion.
100%. Yes. And so,
because with the atomic bomb tests, we knew we had this big weapon that we could use. And it wasn't more than a month later that they were used. And obviously the outcome of the war was set in stone after that. So, whether these guys wanted to go over there or not, I'm sure that they were probably being sent over there in some regard if they volunteered to go, to be able to be used in case there was an invasion against Japan. But it just didn't come to be.
Yeah, and it was Operation Downfall. I had that in my head,
Downfall.
but for whatever reason, I was thinking, was that an operation at the end of World War II in Germany? But I think that was the name of the movie Downfall.
That was
about
that
in
was the
bunker,
Hitler
right?
movie. Yeah, that's
But
right.
it turns out Operation Downfall was one of the names for that. At any rate, cool stuff.
Okay.
Well, I was in England then at Ipswich when the war ended, and I elected to stay in. I was just a poor old farm boy, and as luck would have it, I was able to stay in the Air Force, in the occupation Air Forces in Germany, down at Munich at an air base called Neubiberg. And as luck would have it again, my wife and year-old son were able to come over. They're one of the first dependents in Germany after the war. We lived in a German cantonment of some sort with barbed wire enclosure around it. The Germans weren't happy with that. Our housing officer got shot for taking over their cantonment. And
House.
if we think the Vietnamese were rough, or if we think the who are we fighting this week? Islamists are rough, so were the Germans. It's going to take a while before the Islamists get cured, if ever.
22 years
Then
ago,
I
he
had
said that.
several tours alternating between the States and Europe, and the States and Europe. Got a promotion down then. I ended up as a full colonel, undeserved probably. I was in the Pentagon at the time, sweating it out. I had tours in various states, lots of crossings of the Atlantic as a troubleshooter, I guess you'd call it, with 26 trips across the Atlantic. My wife crossed the Atlantic 6 times. I ended up having flown 4,500 hours. I pioneered in the first jets, the P-80 and the P-84. I led a flight of 4 P-84s from Shaw Air Force Base, South Carolina, to Manston, England via Otis Air Force Base, Dow Air Force Base, Bangor, Maine, Goose Bay, Labrador, Bluey West 3, Greenland, Keflavik, Iceland, Stormavik, Scotland, and finally into the White Cliffs of Dover, where we stayed 6 months. Beautiful flight. Good time was had by all. I retired in 1968 with 26 years of service. I enjoyed every minute of it.
What an awesome! I love the way he talks about stuff. Yeah, it was fun was had by all.
Pretty
I flew-
matter of fact about everything, isn't he?
Oh my gosh, I like that. So who we fighting this week? Yeah, who we fighting now? I mean, dude, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh
right.
wow.
Was there anything you did for good luck when you went on a mission?
Took a puke, cigarette and a puke. At the fighter pilot's breakfast. They say,
Wow.
you're all right till you got in the airplane. Once you got in the airplane, well, maybe once you got it started, you'd calm down.
Have you flown any of the warbirds after you gotten out? Have you flown any of those planes from the World War II since then?
Yeah, I flew the P-51 a long time after the war. P-47, no. I would say the P-51's only war. Well, I flew the B-25 a lot after the war, and the C-47,
C-47.
He's got planes all over
and
his
the
room.
AT-6. I didn't fly the Stearman after the war.
That was what was so cool about sitting
Oh.
there in his office. He's got model airplanes all over the place. He'd be like, yeah, I flew that one and I flew that.
one. That's a B-25. Holy crap, dude.
So cool. So cool. Okay. Couple clips left and we're going to be wrapped up here. Let's talk a bit about, he's got some comments on the modern military and what he considered to be his greatest achievement.
Okay.
Right after the war, a guy named Engine Charlie, somebody from General Motors, was made Secretary of Defense. He decimated us. Absolutely decimated the Air Force, the Army, and the Navy. When Korea came along in 1948, 49, we were nearly wiped off of the Korean Peninsula because we didn't have any air cover. Engine Charlie, what the hell was his name? Terrible. About like McNamara, only maybe worse. McNamara was no better, excuse me. We're in pretty good shape now. And personnel-wise, we're in pretty good shape. We don't have any draft. They all say we've got enough men. I don't know whether I believe them or not. Probably not. We don't have a draft. We have very, very few people running off to Canada. Only 2 that I can think of. What else is good? Better than it used to be.
What experiences stand out after all this time? Is there anything that sticks out in your head that
My flight up around the North Pole and back down to Manston, England, with 4 of those airplanes right there.
was the
F-84.
84s?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was a fantastic undertaking for green people who didn't know how to navigate in the Arctic. We lost 1 man. Engine quit. And we never recovered him.
So how many of you were flying over there in that group?
70.
70. Wow.
The 20th Fighter Group. We pioneered that. But today, you take off and stick a probe in a tanker airplane and relax. We didn't have tankers in those days. We didn't have radar. We didn't have autopilot. Our ejection seats didn't work. Our engines didn't work very well. The canopies wouldn't jettison on some of them. What else?
What was the cruising speed on those F-84s whenever you were flying over there?
Oh, 350 to 380, I guess. I'm thinking. Seems right.
So I did some research on this event since he's brought it up twice now.
Yep.
He was talking about he was in the 20th Fighter Bomber Group, actually was what it was. And I found this actually on the internet, and this is a little bit of a summary of this event. And I was wondering what was the purpose of them doing this, and when did it actually happen? Well, the Korean War had just started, and the U.S. Air Force plans had been sent to SAC was to send the SAC 12th Fighter Wing to England to bolster the forces that were in Europe. The Cold War had gotten hot before the 12th F-84s were ready to go. And the 20th director of operation was called from a Saturday night party at the club to take a message that the 20th was going to England, like ASAP. The 20th had about 7 days to get ready. Getting ready included receiving a set of 2 230-gallon tip tanks for each airplane to replace the 185-gallon tanks that had been provided. And on July the 19th of 1950, the 20th Fighter Bomber Group, under the command of Colonel John Dunning, executed the first movement of a full jet fighter group to Europe. The 20th flew their F-84Ds from Shaw Air Force Base to Dow Air Force Base in Maine. And at Dow, a message was received to remove personal baggage from the 50 caliber ammunition compartments so that live ammo could be loaded.
Oh, wow.
Headquarters felt that there was a very strong possibility that the Soviets would try to interfere with the movement of the unit to England. And the 20th would then continue on its movement without Soviet action via Goose Bay Labrador, Bluey West 1, Greenland, Keflavik, Iceland, Kinross, Scotland, and finally to Manston, England. Halfway between Greenland and Iceland, one of the F-84s had an engine flame out. The pilot did bail out, but he died from exposure before the rescue vessel could get to him.
Oh my gosh.
On the return trip, all pilots wore their anti-exposure suits because of that.
Yeah.
One of the primary reasons for this move was to discourage the Soviets from taking any action in Europe while we were preoccupied with the Korean War.
But you know what's sad? And I agree with him. And I never understood this. A lot of people can be frustrated historically by the United States not being prepared for World War I. You know, for having that weird trinket army and having to raise all those men to send them over there. Not being entirely prepared by World War II, having the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor and, having to take this really weak military and build it up again. You think we would have learned our lesson, but a lot of people don't realize when the Korean War started, we were in horrible shape.
Yeah.
The idea was, from what I've read, is that because of atomic weapons, that there wouldn't be any large land wars because you just nuke people. Or because we had nuclear weapons, people wouldn't mess with us. They didn't think conventional wars were going to be a thing. So they invested a lot of money in missile technology, submarine technology, bomber technology. The SAC base is where he talked about where they stripped those fighters from. And they were wrong. They were totally, unbelievably, ridiculously, stupidly wrong. Because if you look at what happened in the Korean War, we had a bunch of soldiers with World War II equipment that wasn't particularly plentiful that got pushed almost out of the Korean Peninsula.
Yeah.
And it was shameful. It was shameful that we didn't have the resources we needed after a half a century of not being prepared and having to just make do with stuff while people died in holding action. So I don't blame him for being upset about that.
Well, and especially a guy like him that's a career military guy. that
Totally. He
retires
would
at-
know that.
Absolutely. And I'm sure that these guys talked about this in the officers club
Yes.
all the time after 5 shots of whiskey and everything else. I mean,
Dude, he named names. He named
Yeah.
names.
that's right.
Right.
Yeah.
He didn't just say, well, I was upset what we did there. He named names of people who he felt like gutted the Air Force. And the same thing was being happened in all the services. And it is absolutely shameful. I
Well, and
agree
that's
with
why
that.
that's why we leave these comments in. You can tell whenever, like, this was the wrap up of the interview, and I asked him, about this, and he felt like he wanted to say something about that.
Yep.
And it's the least we can do to keep their values and their comments in for posterity. So
And to put it in context, it's like, why do we have to scramble 20 fighters
Right.
over to Europe really quickly?
Yeah.
Because they
Well-
weren't there, because we had gutted our military and we didn't have the forces placed around the world like we do. today.
it wasn't because we could. It was
Right.
because it was necessary, and we actually had to do that as a stopgap. One fighter group sent over there.
And one person died. Someone died going over there in a jet because we didn't have the foresight to have enough fighters in an area so close to, at the time, would have been the biggest threat in the world to us, which was the Soviet Union.
Which is why he brought up that guy Engine Charlie and how
Exactly.
how bad he decimated the military. Okay,
Yep.
last clip here, and then we're going to wrap it up.
Looking back and seeing how important World War II was to America's history in the 20th century, especially, what do you think is the most significant result of us having won the war?
Seeing what American productivity could do in a pinch. Let me give you some statistics. Pearl Harbor was in 1941. In 42, we started building up our industrial base. In 1943, we cranked out 96,000 airplanes. 96,000 airplanes in 1 year we made.
Yep.
We made 17,000 B-24s, 14,000 B-17s, 17,000 P-47s. I'm just talking about airplanes. I don't know how many carriers and destroyers, submarines we built, or how many tanks we built. But the American industrial base had been asleep in the 1930s. Now it was working day and night. Women went to work. Women found they could make a man's pay for a man's day's work. Some of them haven't come home yet.
That's true.
Now, that was the most insignificant thing, I think. And we haven't let it get back too bad yet. We could be a little better organized, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, so that concludes our interview clips with Colonel Glenn Crum. One of the few things I wanted to mention in closing here, he passed away April 23rd, 2009. His funeral was in my hometown of Palmyra, Illinois. And his son was named James Andrew Crum after his hero, Jamie Andrews,
That's cool.
that inspired him in his career. Glenn's nickname was Spider. That was his
really?
nickname. Yeah. And I'm not
Okay.
sure. I didn't know that until I read it in this book here, actually, what his nickname was. Pretty cool. He flew 40 missions, like we mentioned. He said he had over 4,500 hours of flying time, I think, in his career, which is crazy. So anyway, his unit, while he said he wasn't, at one point he said in the interview, and I don't know that I can't believe I didn't keep it in there. He said, yeah, I was in 356. He goes, I'm really wasn't that impressed with that unit. I think that's because he was able to look back on it after his career and realized it could have been run better, maybe.
Yep.
And one of the reasons was because, like I said, they were known as a hard luck unit, but they took their mission very seriously. That was to escort the bombers and try to keep the bombers from being lost. And even though they're known as a hard luck outfit, the bomber crews expressed great admiration and thanks to that unit all the time. So we have to remember that it wasn't just about shooting down planes and scoring your own tallies, which is a fine thing to do if that's your group's mission. But these guys stuck to it and they took it on the chin because of that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this was a really great interview, Ryan. It's really cool to be able to, not just learn about or experience, what someone else's history was during this, really tumultuous time, but to have it be someone that you had already encountered, have it be someone from your these are small rural communities, right?
Right.
Where you can have a pilot fly home in a post World War I bomber and end up changing the life of another young man there who would become a colonel and name his son after that guy. And that these are people that were known to you in the community in some way, shape, or form, whether it had an airfield named after them or you had a chance to get to know them serendipitously at the airfield. It's harder to do that if you live in a place like Houston. But the fact that, the small town may not have had as many people there that you could have rubbed shoulders with, but when you did, it was more intimate. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, we're going to wrap it up here. Everybody, thanks for listening. We always appreciate all of our listeners out there sticking with us to the very end of every series. Please continue to do so. Tell your friends about us. And we've got some great stuff still coming up this year. So anyway, we're going to wrap up here. My name is Ryan Fairfield.
And I'm Tony Lupo.
We'll catch you next time.